Hey there, this is a review of 1984. I recently read this book, 1984, by George Orwell, and it's a pretty good book. I mean, like, I heard a lot about it. It's definitely one of the classics in literature, and I mean, a lot of people recommended this book to me, said it, you can learn a lot from it, and I think I did learn quite a bit from it. And what surprised me the most was, this book was written in, from what I remember, it's like, I searched it up, but it was written in like 1940 something. And he was like predicting the future of like 1984. And then, a lot of the stuff in this book still kind of are relevant in today's world also. Some could argue even more relevant in today's world, which is really surprising because some guy who wrote it back in like the 40s, is still able to kind of like talk about the modern issues of the day. I guess that's why people say this book is so good. With that being said, the book, people said it was really good, and usually when I read these kind of books, I'm quite like skeptical, I guess, or I come in with a, like, I guess, uh, like an opinion beforehand. I'm thinking like, oh, it's got to be really good. So I have like high standards for that book, right? And so like reading this book, I'm gonna say when you read this book, it's kind of slow actually. Okay, so it starts out pretty slow. It does like get faster, but like just throughout the book, kind of the pacing is pretty slow. But it's a book that you gotta sit with, right? And it's a book that depending, I'd say like you could probably read it at a young age. I think it's good to probably read it at like a young age, maybe somewhere in like middle school or like high school. But that's not saying that everyone will understand it. And, the fact that you might not understand it might make it boring to some kids. But I think with these kind of classic books, it's good to read them at an early age just because a lot of these ideas kind of, continue on later. Like you'll see a lot of these ideas reflected in later literature. So with that, like it will improve your writing, it will improve just like your creativity, I guess, because a lot of stuff are based on the classics. In this book, it talks about the totalitarian state in 1984, right? So it follows your protagonist Winston, a guy, and he's somewhere in the outer party. So there's the inner party, there's the outer party, and then there's the proletariat. And in this book, it basically kind of parallels what's happening in China, communist China, and Russia. Those kind of authoritarian states, and you can also think of like maybe under the Nazis, like during like Hitler's regime. So it's talking about those kind of totalitarian states, and in this case, there's the main thing is Big Brother. He's kind of in charge of everything, and he controls thought, any kind of speech. There's no freedom of thought, no freedom of speech. So really far from our democratic societies of like Canada and the U.S. Some could argue that Canada and the U.S. are continuously moving more and more into the directions of like kind of like a state where speech and thought are controlled. While we still do have those, it could be argued. Some might say that, but anyways, with this book, it's quite a like it's a dystopian fiction, right? So it's quite like a, I guess you would say like far blown version of that. Like it's China and Russia right now, probably not be as bad as this. Like they like are constantly watching you. They have these things called telescreens that will like constantly watch a person. Any kind of like movement, any kind of facial feature wrong could get you caught. And it just follows the story of like Winston, how he tries to kind of live in this society, and then how he potentially like challenges some of these things, and how he just has to follow along in a lot of ways. It's also a love story, I'd say, because there is a love interest in the book. But overall, I don't want to spoil the ending, but it's a kind of a bleak book, I'd say. Overall, just like seeing how bad life would be under like a totalitarian regime. But luckily, I live in Canada, so it's nice to have those democratic freedoms and everything. But overall, this book, I'd probably rate it, let's say, out of 10, I'd probably rate it, just an 8.5, I'd say, because as I said, the pacing for me, it was just slightly slow, but I found a lot of good information in this book, and it was something that I haven't really read much about. Like, I've read a lot of the dystopians, but I really like the premises of this book. Following this, I'm going to try to read Animal Farm, also by George Orwell, and also kind of talking about, I think from what I read, the synopsis is like another kind of like power, structure about power, and that's about how like animals on a farm, kind of like, I think they take out the farmer, and then how they kind of create a new class of government. So I'll be reading that next, but 1984, pretty good book. A lot of references made to this in pop culture, so definitely worth a read. All right, that's my book review of 1984.